need police, fire, medical?
Maybe both. I'm not sure. There's just someone screaming outside.
So you think he's yelling help?
Yes.
All right, what is your phone number?
There's gunshots.
You just heard gunshots?
Yes.
How many?
Just one.
The chilling 911 call as the shooting of Trayvon Martin was taking place. Back with me now is Robert Zimmerman, whose brother George killed Trayvon Martin. Who is screaming there, Robert?
That's my brother.
How can you be so sure? Because Trayvon's family are equally adamant it is their boy.
You know, that's a very sensitive thing to talk about. I don't blame them for being as equally adamant. I don't blame anybody whose family member they believe or perceive that they hear on a tape for being as equally adamant. I would expect nothing less, actually. I know that that's George. I know that one of the saddest things for him in this whole thing was that despite those screams, no one came to his aid. Those screams could have avoided, you know, what eventually George had to do to defend his life. If someone had, you know, heard them come out, shone a light on the situation, said, "Get out of here, what are you guys doing?" Because of that pain that he felt in particular, that he was screaming out so many times, I know that that's his voice. It sounds just like my voice. I mean, he's my brother. That's what I sound like if I yell. But, you know, there are hopefully technological means to sort all that out. We thought
the other technological means that have been deployed on a tape are the reference that your brother makes under his breath, which appears to be the racial term that people have deduced it was. I'm not going to repeat it now.
I've heard it, yes.
You know what it is. I mean,
right.
CNN got that slowed down, replayed it 10 times. I heard it. I'm pretty sure what I heard. I'm pretty sure it was a racial slur. What else could it have been?
It could have been anything. If we slow down...
You know your brother.
I do.
You look like him, you sound like him.
Right. He speaks 2 languages fluently.
What do you think he's saying?
That tape, it's my understanding, is not actually in the original 911 tapes. It's after media outlets have slowed down, buffed up, redone, retouched.
Right, but it exists.
Reconditioned.
It exists.
Well, it does not exist as it exists. It is a reconditioned piece of audio to satisfy whatever you want anybody to hear in that tape. I don't know.
Well, I don't think it is. I mean, I think that, to be factual, that part of the tape is under his breath. Mm-hmm. The police missed it first time round. They've accepted that. The question becomes, what is your brother saying? As I say, when I heard it, I believe I heard a racial slur. What do you think you heard?
Right, I believe...
What do you think those 2 words were?
I don't believe that, first of all, that they're words. I don't think that when someone is running and making, you know, utterances, not necessarily words, but utterances from strain under their breath, you can take any of that.
But what do you believe he was saying?
I have no idea that he was even saying anything. That's what I'm trying to say.
He clearly is saying something. I mean, he's clearly saying 2 words.
I don't know that that's the case, Pierce. I don't believe that that's
the reason I'm asking is that if he is saying what I and many others believe him to be saying, mm-hmm. it adds a racial element to this. It adds fuel to the fire that this was a case of racial profiling, that your brother saw a young black boy in a hoodie and decided he had to deal with him.
Right. Well, that whole hoodie thing, I mean, a hoodie is a description. You know, you're a man wearing a black suit and a red tie. That doesn't mean that if you commit a crime, we should all go out and march in black suits and red ties. That was just simply how someone was described. That's not what made him suspicious.
Have you ever heard your brother utter a racist remark about anybody?
No. And certainly that word is not even in his vocabulary. You know, of all words to say this was a racial slur, I'm a little bit older, you know, I was kind of familiar with it, that it was used in literature, you know, things like that, and that it was a word much more prevalent before, you know, something kind of you're exposed to in school growing up reading. But
let me ask you this. Why was your brother walking around this neighborhood anyway? He didn't have his neighborhood watch stuff on, nothing to identify him as any kind of neighborhood watch operative or security guy So if you're Trayvon Martin, you're 17 years old, you're a boy, you're going to your father's girlfriend's house, you've been to a store, you've bought some Skittles, and there's this big guy who is following you. It's scary, isn't it? I mean, you can't blame Trayvon Martin for wondering what the hell this guy is doing or who he is.
Well, you know, sadly, even your statements now are just a product of conjecture. Saying that he was patrolling a neighborhood is absolutely false. He was not patrolling the neighborhood. He was going to a store, Target. There was someone in the rain. According to even Mr. Crump, the family's attorney, taking shelter, what he calls taking shelter in other buildings. So George just saw simply someone who, everyone who lives in Florida knows when it rains, it pours. People take shelter in their home, or they see that it's raining and they wait 10 minutes, then they go out. George saw Mr. Martin suspicious in context of what had been happening in his community, not just because there was
George found him suspicious.
George found him suspicious.
Trayvon Martin would argue he wasn't being suspicious at all. He was just walking to a house.
Right, and the police are the people who, you know, would have made that determination ultimately.
How do you feel, personally, that your brother has killed somebody in these circumstances?
No matter what, you know, I try to think of what if this were me? What if this were someone who had broken in my home and I had to defend myself, or some other situation where self-defense fits the mold more and it's easy. We can understand, oh yeah, that's clearly self-defense because there's no room for conjecture. This was my home, you broke in and that happened. I've tried to think about it in terms of what if this were me. I would at least want to feel supported by my family, and I would definitely respect the process that we have in this country.
Would it be easier for everybody, particularly your brother, if he was now arrested and there was a proper investigation that started from that point? Do you believe that it was actually, with hindsight, a mistake for the police to effectively conclude on the night he had no case to answer?
Yeah, absolutely not. Investigations in our country are not effectively started once people are arrested, nor are people arrested simply because another group demands their arrest. There's either probable cause or there's not probable cause to arrest someone.
Has George ever lied to you?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Never? He's always been completely 100% honest?
He would be the more honest of the two, the most honest brother, I would say. He's very straight and narrow and, you know, very helpful guy, very concerned with his neighbor and the truth.
Very quickly, finally, what would you say to the family of Trayvon Martin, to his mother in particular?
Well, to his mother, you know, personally myself, I can't speak for George. This is a tragedy. Her son was lost. I feel very badly about that. And I want, in the end, not for her son's memory to be seen as how we degraded our system and turned into mob rule and went into a hate speech, you know, carnival of hatred and let's go get them and tweeting addresses. I want Mrs. Martin, the same Mrs. Martin yesterday who saw humanity in my brother, to know that I can see humanity too. In Trayvon, I understand this is a story about human beings. And I think that was a touching thing that she said last night. And, you know, ultimately, we all wish that this was a different situation.
Robert Zimmerman, thank you very much for coming in today.
You, Pierce.
And
Thanks
I
for
appreciate
having
that
us.
your family is also going through a pretty hellish time right now, and I appreciate you showing your face and speaking up for your brother.
Thank you, Pierce.
Thank you. Next, a man who has strong feelings about this story, the always outspoken Mike Tyson.